Ms. Tamar Kaplan-Tourgeman, take the floor. You have the floor, Madam.
Mr. President, members of the Court, it is an honor to appear before you on behalf of the State of Israel. As you have just heard, Israel is still under attack. We are still counting more and more of our dead and attending to 2,000 more who are wounded. No less than 132 children, women, and men are still held hostage in unimaginable conditions by Hamas and other Palestinian militants in Gaza. Tens of thousands of Israeli citizens are internally displaced. Most of them have not seen their homes in over 7 months. Many have no homes to return to. The very grave effects of the horrific massacre of 7 October continue to ripple through our people and communities, who must not be forgotten. They too are worthy of international law's protection. Mr. President, members of the Court, I draw particular attention to the women still held hostage in Gaza. Ms. Amidst, who was held captive in Gaza by Hamas for 55 days, testified recently that she was physically abused, beaten up, and chained to a bed, threatened at gunpoint, and forced to perform sexual acts on her captor. Hamas refuses to release these women and all the other hostages it holds. It brazenly refuses to alleviate the humanitarian suffering that this war has brought to all concerned on both sides. It has turned down numerous proposals for a ceasefire, and it continues to favor death and destruction as a strategy. We heard nothing about that yesterday. In fact, while South Africa made many outrageous, false statements yesterday, perhaps most striking was what it did not say. We have hardly heard the word Hamas, even though it is Hamas that has brought about all the suffering and pain that we are witnessing, the suffering of Israelis and Palestinians alike. Instead, we sat here and listened to venomous accusations, to language that is so hateful, so out of touch with reality, that it was difficult to believe we are in a court of law. Mr. President, members of the Court, there is no doubt that this war is tragic and has caused great suffering on both sides. Again, this is Hamas's doing. South Africa provides an account that is not only incredibly partial, it is also distorted. But to apply the law properly, to impart justice, surely the facts must matter. These facts cannot but show that Israel is seeking consistently to abide by the law in the excruciating circumstances of warfare that Hamas has deliberately created. The blatant misrepresentation we heard yesterday cannot alter that. For a start, South Africa claims that Israel has shut down the 2 main land crossings through which aid enters into Gaza, this being the Rafah and Kerem Shalom crossings, and that Israel has cut Gaza off from all humanitarian, medical, and other supplies. This is patently untrue. The truth is that Israel allows and facilitates as it has been for months, the provision of more and more humanitarian aid to the civilian population throughout the Gaza Strip. It does so through a number of crossings on a daily basis. I refer the Court to the map that is now on the screen before you and also at tab 5 of your folders. Contrary to South Africa's claim, the Kerem Shalom crossing has been in continuous operation since December 2023, with one recent exception between the 5th and 8th of May, when it was closed after Hamas fired at Kerem Shalom. Even though Hamas fire continued on 8, 10, 11, 12 May, and several times even yesterday, the crossing remained open, allowing more and more aid to flow in. This crossing has been the central entry point for aid for months. I know that South Africa has not only wrongly alleged that the Kerem Shalom crossing has been shut down, it also requested that Israel relinquish control over it. I hardly need to say much about this request, given that Kerem Shalom is situated on sovereign Israeli territory. As for the Rafah crossing, to say that Israel closed this crossing is inaccurate at best. Its operation was disrupted on May 6, and since then, Israel has taken active measures and has been in intensive discussions with Egypt, supported by other international actors, in an effort to resume the flow of aid. In the meantime, and in keeping with its consistent efforts, Israel has taken immediate measures to ensure that alternative paths are available for the continued increase in its provision of humanitarian assistance to the Gaza Strip. In this context, the Prime Minister of Israel convened 2 high-level meetings to ensure continued adequate response to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. The Prime Minister instructed the relevant authorities in Israel to take immediate interim steps to enable increased flow of aid to Gaza Strip through other routes and sources. South Africa neglected to mention yesterday that the total amount of aid entering Gaza in the last few days is now once again increasing significantly. Indeed, on 12 May, a new land crossing was opened at Erez West. It joins yet another new land crossing, fully operationalized, on May 1st at Erez East, which together allow for the entry into Gaza of additional 200 trucks per day after their inspection elsewhere. An additional land route bringing aid into Gaza since March 2024, which again is fully operational, is Gate 96. This land route brings aid directly into northern Gaza, thus reducing the risk of looting of aid convoys that otherwise make their way to the area from the southern part of the Strip. For this purpose, Israel allows Palestinian truck drivers from Gaza to enter Israeli territory following security checks in order to collect and upload humanitarian supplies. Israel has done a great deal to expand the capacity of land crossings, including by extending the working hours there. It has also expanded infrastructure and roads supporting the operations of the crossing. The Israeli government allocated approximately 52 million United States dollars to the implementation of such efforts. We heard nothing about all of that yesterday. Aerial routes remain in operation so as to allow for direct parachuting of aid into Gaza. Such operations are undertaken almost daily, involving a significant number of states. Many thousands of aid packages were provided in this way by dozens of operations in recent weeks. The temporary floating pier off the Gaza coast, whose construction began following President Biden's declaration on 7 March 2024, begins operating today. It is expected to enable the delivery of approximately 2.2 million food portions per day by the World Food Programme. I should add that this location too came under Hamas fire last month while construction was underway. Further progress in relation to maritime routes was achieved last week when Israel and Cyprus adopted on 8 May technical arrangements which aim to facilitate the implementation of the Cyprus Maritime Corridor, about which Israel has previously informed this court. This corridor was already utilized even prior to the concluding of the arrangements, but they will further improve its operation. Is this what a hermetic closure looks like? Mr. President, members of the court, it is not difficult to see that Israel has been making extensive efforts over the recent months, together with various international partners, to increase the provision of humanitarian assistance throughout the Gaza Strip. There have been remarkable achievements. South Africa's complete disregard of this reality and this truth is as telling as it is alarming. Israel's extensive and ongoing actions have been detailed in the reports submitted by Israel to the court, most recently on 28 April. They have brought about a significant increase in the amount of humanitarian aid that had entered into Gaza. They are consistent with a decision adopted on 4 April by Israel Ministerial Committee on National Security Affairs, headed by the Prime Minister of Israel, and I quote, to increase the efforts to allow and facilitate the transfer of humanitarian aid for the civilian population in the Gaza Strip, end of quote, and to establish a ministerial team to, and I quote, implement the policy of the cabinet regarding the transfer of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip, end of quote. The decision records that these steps are undertaken further to the recommendations of security and foreign affairs officials concerning the need to continue the provisions of humanitarian aid to the civilian population in the Gaza Strip. All of these steps have had a significant impact in alleviating the humanitarian situation and avoiding the catastrophes which South Africa threatened were imminent in December, then January, then February, then March, and then April. While the situation is constantly changing, Israel is adapting and continues to work to improve the humanitarian situation and to prevent harm to civilians and to aid workers. I note that, as Mr. Noam has said, Israel's actions in this context are currently under the judicial review of Israel Supreme Court. These steps have been repeatedly accompanied by clear statements from Israel leadership. For example, Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu said on 15 May that, and I quote, "Our policy from the start, from the beginning of the war, my policy was, you have to provide the basic humanitarian aid that is required by international law." But in the last 6 weeks, we actually changed it, not only to providing basic humanitarian aid, but flooding Gaza with humanitarian aid, end of quote. Israel's defense minister, Gallant, likewise said on May 1st that, and I quote, "We are taking significant measures in order to increase the volume of humanitarian aid into Gaza. This is essential," end of quote. He added that, and I quote once more, "We are fighting Hamas, a brutal terrorist organization. We are not fighting the civilian in Gaza, and we will facilitate the delivery of humanitarian aid," end of quote. In order to show a genocidal intent that simply is not there, South Africa continues to distort other statements. In quoting the Prime Minister as stating that Gaza must not constitute a threat to Israel, they omit to mention that he was expressly speaking about Hamas and returning the hostages it took. When quoting the Minister of Defense as saying that the military operates neighborhood by neighborhood and will reach every location in Gaza, they neglected to say that he too referred expressly to Hamas. In the same statement, he also made plain that the humanitarian issue is a central one. While South Africa turns a blind eye to Israel's remarkable efforts, they have not gone unnoticed by others. The UN Senior Humanitarian Coordinator, who was appointed following Security Council Resolution 2720, said on 24 April in a briefing to the UN Security Council that Israel has taken a number of steps to improve aid delivery. When asked about her contacts with the Israeli side, she said that there is a very constructive cooperation with her mission. Senior government officials of various states likewise said they saw real and demonstrable progress in the delivery of aid. To say, as South Africa presently does, that Israel is deliberately denying humanitarian aid cannot be farther from the truth. On the contrary, Israeli actions undertaken in accordance with orders from Israel's highest levels of government show exactly the opposite. Only yesterday, no less than 365 trucks carrying humanitarian supplies entered into Gaza through the various land crossings. More than 330 of the trucks entered through Kerem Shalom, the same crossing that South Africa said yesterday was shut down. Other allegations about South Africa fare no better. Contrary to South Africa allegations, thousands of international aid workers have been entering and exiting Gaza. Deconfliction mechanisms were reviewed and improved following highly unfortunate incidents in order to guarantee that their safety is always maintained. These lessons learned, too, have been detailed in Israel's recent report to the court. Fuel continues to be delivered to Gaza, including this past Wednesday, when 76,000 liters were transferred to the World Food Programme. Times do not permit setting the record straight with regard to all of South Africa's outrageous misrepresentations. But the claim that Israel deliberately hampering medical services in Gaza, or that Rafah is the last viable location for medical care, cannot be left unanswered. Israel persistently continues to facilitate the enhancement of medical services throughout the entire Gaza Strip. In addition to the hospitals located in Rafah, efforts have been extended to support the rehabilitation of hospitals elsewhere in the territory. This may be seen at tab 6 of your folders. In fact, 14 hospitals are in operation outside Rafah. 8 field hospitals are in full operation, with only 2 of them located in Rafah. A field hospital, which was established by the ICRC in the Al-Muasi area, began operating as recently as 9 May. 1 more field hospital is due to open later this month, and the establishment of 4 more field hospitals is currently under consideration. Mobile clinics continue to operate in the Al-Muasi area too. Collaboration with a host of international actors, including the World Health Organization, continues in order to strengthen and expand medical care all over. South Africa would do well to tell its ally, Hamas, to stop exploiting hospitals and other protected sites as military command centers. And since we heard grave misrepresentation yesterday about the Shifa hospital, it must be made clear that even during very intense fighting in the Shifa hospital, after Hamas reinstated the hospital compound as a military hub, the IDF took proactive steps aimed to ensure continuous medical care to patients hospitalized there. Despite the intense military activity on the premises, no patients or medical staff were harmed during the operation by the IDF. On 22nd March 2024, the IDF brought into the hospital, in the course of its operational activity, trucks carrying medical equipment, food and water, including over 10,000 units of medicine, hundreds of painkiller packages, over 100 packages of bandage and IVs, and dozens of advanced medical monitoring devices. Contrary to the impression that South Africa sought to leave you with, the IDF Chief of Staff said to the forces on that location that, and I quote, "We do everything not to harm patients, not to harm medical staff. In this operation, not one medical staff was harmed, no patients were harmed, and many terrorists were killed and captured," end of quote. He said that the hospital is not a safe place, not safe for terrorists. South Africa even saw fit to present to the court a false translation in its attempt to create intent. The soldiers in the video shown yesterday were not saying to destroy, but to dismantle Rafah, a clear reference to Hamas capabilities. South Africa ignores any such statements that show Israel's true intention. It had to distort the facts to sustain its label of genocide in such repugnant terms as final stages and extermination zones. Israel continues to take extraordinary measures in order to minimize harm to Palestinian civilians in Gaza. These have been described at length to the court in the previous hearing and in our written submission, and ignored to the same extent by South Africa. Time permits only several examples, one of which is that Israel has sent over 15 million text messages informing civilians of planned IDF activity in specific areas so that they can avoid them. It has made over 18 million pre-recorded phone calls and an additional 100,000 individual phone calls alerting individuals of danger in their vicinity. Over 9 million leaflets dropped over specific areas have provided civilians with information as to where humanitarian aid may be accessed and how to leave zone of combat. Once again, is this how a military set on total or partial destruction of people operates? It is also the Israeli military that has put in place clear and definite procedure for targeting. This requires, inter alia, selection of munitions that would achieve the military need while minimizing civilian harm, and the conduct for each and every strike of a proportionality assessment in accordance with international humanitarian law. The IDF, moreover, marks sensitive sites, such as the medical service and shelters, on military operational systems, and takes additional measures to ensure that IDF forces are aware of them. All this likewise applies in operations in Rafah, as may be seen at tab 7 of your folders. While fighting to defend Israel, it is also engaged in ensuring that humanitarian aid continues to flow in. South Africa speaks of extermination zones, but the source cited in its request in support of these allegations does not say this, let alone prove it. It does reference express statement from the IDF Chief of Staff that civilians in combat areas must not be killed. An official statement by the IDF that the IDF does not define areas where anyone present could be shot. And a discussion of the IDF review of exceptional incidents where there are allegations of violation of this rule. Equally unsettling is South Africa's false allegation that the IDF uses artificial intelligence that decides who to attack, a claim the origin of which is one press report that relies on anonymous sources. Unfortunately, South Africa did not tell the court yesterday of Israel's official response to the report, which states clearly that the claims are simply not true. South Africa's claims regarding IDF attack procedures are also false. Mr. President, members of the court, if South Africa seeks to point to any change in the situation since your order of 26 March, it should have acknowledged all these remarkable humanitarian efforts by Israel. It should also have recognized the crimes committed constantly by Hamas and the circumstances that compel Israel to respond to them, as any state would. Instead, it offers grandstanding and rhetoric. No real evidence. That's just a transparent attempt to relitigate the same matter one more time and to extract more and more from this procedure. Mr. President, members of the court, even if South Africa could establish a relevant change in the circumstances, which it has not done, it has not established any change in the situation that would justify the extreme measure that is now seeking. The measures currently in place are entirely sufficient and no further ones are needed. As Mr. Noam explained, South Africa is trying, once more, to drag this court down a very dangerous path. It will have you say that a sovereign state that is under a persistent attack, whose citizens are held hostage in brutal conditions, cannot defend itself or its citizens. As you have consistently made clear, there is no international law to this effect. Indeed, it is inconceivable that there would be. Mr. President, members of the court, we must be very clear. Acceding to South Africa's request would be an affront to the very idea of the protection afforded by the law. For the court to accede to South Africa's request is to enable Hamas's battalion to continue to target Israel, to attack humanitarian crossing, and to destine the Palestinians in Gaza to perpetual war. Is to enable Hamas to reconstitute its forces in order to commit the 7 October atrocities again and again, as they have vowed to do. It is to condemn the hostages to near certain death. What would it mean for the women still held in captivity? Granting South Africa's request would be to side with a terrorist organization, which will no doubt celebrate any such decision. It is to legitimize, protect, and reward Hamas's despicable method of warfare, to enable its heinous crimes to persist, with all the consequences that might follow. Mr. President, members of the court, it is one thing to require that Israel abide by its international legal obligations and protect civilians when exercising its inherent right to defend itself. But to deny Israel that inherent right is a different thing altogether. It is unthinkable. Can it really be maintained that if hostages are brutally held captive in Rafah, Israel cannot come to their rescue? Can it really be maintained that if Hamas continues to use Gaza as a launching pad for its indiscriminate attack, Israel cannot defend itself against them? We respectfully submit that international law offers a clear answer to these questions. Mr. President, members of the court, on this basis and in accordance with Article 60, Paragraph 2 of the Rules of Court, I now proceed to read Israel's final submission. The State of Israel requests the court to reject the request for the modification and indication of provisional measures submitted by the Republic of South Africa. That concludes Israel's presentation. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Until next time, stay informed and inspired. This is Dejobnik signing off.